without further ado, I'm going to introduce Travis Taylor. He is currently an area livestock extension agent based in Yuma County, and he has been for a lot of number of years in the past. He's been a 4-H youth development agent, and he's got a lot of experience producing livestock as well as judging all of the species at numerous fairs and events, and coaching judging teams. So Travis, I'm sure you can do a better job at that than me, but thank you very much for being here for us.
Well, thanks, Kenzie, and I'm glad to be here tonight. It's kind of fun to be teaching again instead of sitting in a meeting where I'm talking about all the things going on in the world. But showing pigs is what we're talking about tonight, and really this portion or this deal is based on selection, is kind of what Kenzie talked about. But we'll talk about some of the other things you need to be doing when you select some of these show hogs. But as you can see there, that picture on the front is my daughter. She's 19 now. That's when she was 8. We had 200 pigs at our county fair. The Duroc pig there, if you know which one that is the reserve champion at our county fair that year. She also had the grand champion, and it's the white pig kind of off to what would be your guys' left over there in the other pen. We had it by itself, but she did that, and then she also had the champion pig her last year in 4-H. So along the way, she's had a lot of fun, and we've shown a lot of pigs. We raised the white pig ourselves. We raised the black pig there, and we had purchased the Duroc because she just likes to show a Duroc pig. And I didn't raise any of those, but it's been a long experience, and we're going to talk to you guys tonight about selecting some of those animals and making sure you kind of work your way around some of the problems that may come. So I'm trying to get my screen to click here, Kenzie. There you go. So first of all, what traits are important? Well, we know that we are going to select our pigs based on the amount of muscle they have, because muscle is what we sell, and we sell that muscle as a product in the end. We're going to talk about the structural design and some things to look for in a young pig that you need to be aware of, because structural problems in young pigs only tend to get exaggerated as they grow up and get to a mature size. We'll talk about the importance of looking for pigs that are going to have some volume and capacity, big-bodied pigs that will feed efficiently for you and have those production capabilities to grow well. Finally, we're going to talk about fat, because we want a quality product and how a pig develops over time. And I think before we start talking a little bit about that, most of you probably on here have an idea the parts of the pig, okay? There's going to be some interesting parts that I'm probably going to talk a little bit more about tonight that you're not going to realize. I'm going to talk a lot about the cannon bone. And that's the bone that goes from the knee on the front leg down to the pastern, and also the rear cannon bone, the hock, down to the rear pastern. I'm going to talk about the length of neck. We're going to talk about the levelness of the rump and the hip set, and talk about the head carriage a lot when we're talking about selecting some of these young pigs. So those are some of the parts that we're going to be talking about, besides all the muscle parts that you guys are used to seeing. So I think it's important when we start selecting pigs that we know kind of what we're talking about in some of the different areas. With that being said, pigs are really made up of 3 different things when we start talking about them. As pigs grow, they have what I call the bone or frame phase, and that's where they grow the actual skeleton and bone mass that we're going to see. After that, pigs will enter a phase 2 where they grow muscle. And then finally, we have a 3rd phase where we grow fat. So if you look at that, we refer to that shape of that orange arc on your screen as a growth curve. So all pigs tend to grow bone first, then muscle, and then fat. And if you can see that top Yorkshire boar there, he's a little longer in his cannon bones. He's a little longer in his neck than the boar that's the bottom. And we would assume that a growth curve, something like that orange one would be there, where that York boar on the bottom, as he matured, maybe had a growth curve that was shaped more like the green one on the screen. Whereas you can see about a third of the way into the muscle phase, that pig's average daily gain slowed down and even leveled off. And then as he got over into the fat phase, the amount of weight that pig was gaining a day went down. And the main reason for that is we can feed them the same amount, but it takes more energy to put on fat than it does muscle. It takes 2.2 times as much energy in the feed to put on a pound of fat as it does to put on muscle. So if we kind of understand our growth curves, we're going to look at some different things that allow us to have a little longer growth curve. I think understanding the growth curve is important because if you get a pig at 40 pounds, which is back in phase one when they're still growing bone and frame, that's starting to put on a tremendous amount of muscle, that pig may not grow big enough and he may finish at a lighter market weight compared to a pig that is putting on muscle correctly to get to a 280 and even 290 pound market weights. So I'm not sure, Kenzie, I want to take this time. What are the weight limits for the Adams County Swine Show?
Oh, you put me on the spot. Adams County, we are 290 is our top and 230 is our bottom, I believe.
Okay, I think that sounds right. That's right in line with what the Colorado State Fair is. And I think those weights are reasonable target weights. I think you need to shoot for a target weight above 250 pounds with your market hogs to be competitive in most shows. So if we're over 250 pounds, I think that we can be pretty competitive. So most important thing is to try to start with a pig that's the right size and the right age. And how do we do that? Well, first of all, you need to know when your fair is. And you need to know how many days you are till fair. Because pigs gain faster as they get bigger. And it's a simple fact that as pigs get bigger, they can eat more. And the more they eat, the bigger they grow. So a 40-pound pig cannot physically eat enough to gain 2 pounds a day because it takes almost 4 pounds of feed a day to get a pig to gain that first pound. And then the next pound takes about 3 pounds of feed. So on 7 pounds of feed, a pig will be gaining closer to 2 pounds a day. However, a 100-pound pig, it's hard to get 7 pounds of feed in him. He's going to eat more like 5 pounds a day. So he physically can't get enough feed through him. Other factors there, as you can see, are going to be the genetics, including the breed and the sex. Barrows usually gain faster than gilts, but at the same time, gilts tend to stay leaner than barrows at the same weights. So there's some give and take there. I think it's important, most of you, there's a lot of purebred pigs, Yorks, Durocs, Hamps, Berkshires, Chester Whites. It's important to know that anytime we cross those breeds, those pigs tend to gain faster. So crossbred pigs usually perform better than straight bred pigs or pigs that have a registration paper with them that are all the same breed. So we also want to know what our pigs are going to gain. We'll have a starting weight, and usually we would have a pig nomination time. Depending on that, when that is, most pigs will gain about 1.75 pounds a day. And I know a lot of people said, well, a pig will gain 2 pounds a day. Yes, when a pig weighs 220 pounds, he probably gains 2 pounds a day. From the time most of you 4-H kids are going to have your pigs, on average, and this is over being an extension agent and seeing rate of gain contests over a lot of pigs, probably about 1,000 head of pigs in the last 10 years, the top pigs gain right at 2 pounds a day. And a lot of times the county fair rate of gain winner will gain 1.9. So I think if you look at an average for you guys, they're going to gain 1.75 pounds a day. And if you know the number of days till fair and your target weight, you know what your pig weighs and you know how much feed it's getting in. So for example, let's say we had a pig sale on March 15th, okay? And our fair there is July 31st. You can see at the top. So if we had a July 31st fair and on March 15th, we have 138 days till fair. If he can gain 1.85 a day, you can start with a 25-pound pig. If he can only gain in 1.5 pounds, you need a 75-pound pig there. And if he gains 1.7 a day over that 138 days, you need to start with a 45-pound pig. If we're buying those same pigs 15 days later in April, that's only 122 days per fair. So there's going to be less gain and they need to start at a bigger weight. So what if your target weight is 280 versus 260? Well, you can calculate by subtracting what he's going to gain, that 1.75 from 260 pounds, and you can start with a little smaller pig. So if you look at the pig over there on the right side of your screen, that Hampshire pig is probably one of those pigs we can target for a 280-pound weight, just based on the length of cannon bone, particularly the length of the rear cannon bone, the length of the body in that pig, the length of neck. There's a lot of things that you can select from that pig to say, there's one that we can target for about 280 pounds when that pig right there in the picture is weighing about 45 to 50 pounds when the picture was taken. Now, all pigs are going to get deeper as they mature. They're going to put on more fat, and they should put on more muscle too as they mature. So when you're picking those pigs out, I think it's very important to target your fair, because in 4-H, we're not only targeting for a market weight, we want them to weigh a specific weight on a particular date, and that's hard to say. So is there any questions right now about how you would calculate what size of pig or what range of pig you need to be purchasing? Good. We'll slide on forward then and talk about what that pig is going to look like when it's mature. So we have two shapes there. And really, when a judge is out there evaluating the animal in the ring, there's two different types of shape. The one in the green outline is what I call as a barbell shape. It's a little wider at the shoulders, and it gets wider, comes narrower down its loin, down its top, and gets wider as it gets back to its hip. That's a pig that has a muscular, lean shape. As that pig grows, it's going to turn more into the red shape. So if we start with a pig that's too big and we just let it go, that red shape, looks like a rowboat almost. You could set in there and put oars out the side and row that pig down a river. It's kind of a fat shape, but all that lean hourglass shape that's in that green pig has been filled in with fat. So we have an undesirable fat shape. And if it gets real pointy on that circle in red on each end, then you probably have a light muscled and fat pig. So we don't have that shape. And if we're starting with pigs at 60 or 70 pounds that have that red oval shape, they're only going to get worse as they mature. So you want to look for something that has a nice hourglass muscular shape to it, has a groove down its top, and has a dimple ahead of its tail when we start talking about muscle. So I have two pigs on the screen. Kenzie, I'm going to ask him to either type in the chat box. There's a blue pig or a blue rump pig over there, and then there is a hamp belted pig there. And we're talking about evaluating balance in these two animals. So balance is something that's very important, and I kind of quantify balance in livestock as it refers to having the correct proportions of body width, body depth, and body length. So if you look at those two pigs in terms of their balance, in the chat box, is the Hamp or the white pig better balanced to you guys? Here's your chance to participate. I'm going to look at your answers here real quick because I got to get my mouse around here and see the chat. Well, you guys are pretty smart. Everybody's ringing in the Hampshire pig there. I think it's pretty easy to tell that that pig's balanced. He's level down his top line. His tail sets up higher on his hip where it's supposed to. The pig has a correct angle and set to his back leg and his rear hock. Okay, he's not up under himself. And I think it has a distinct advantage there in terms of having just an overall eye-appealing look. And I think that's really important when we start selecting these pigs, because if they don't have an eye-appealing look from the side when they're little, they're probably only going to get worse, because just like me, they get bigger in the middle, they get more fat cover on them, and they really have bad taste and wear Hawaiian shirts. So those pigs, as they grow up for you, the problems with balance will be exaggerated as we go back forward, okay? So balance means that everything fits together in a structurally correct package. So we've got a picture of a couple pigs here. So we've got a black pig and I've got a spotted pig. And this is kind of the exaggerations that we see on both ends of the spectrum, okay? So if you would look at the black pig over there, that gilt tends to be fairly muscular. And if you look at her from behind, the widest point is not over the top of her, but down through the center of what I would call her ham, okay? She's wide at her base, and she definitely has a more muscular shape from behind. If I look at the spotted pig on the right side of the screen, that pig has some issues. That pig is widest up top and then just gets narrower and narrower as it goes all the way to where it's standing at its base. Okay? Am I saying that right, Kenzie? I'm looking at the pictures here on my screen, so I want to make sure they're coming across. Okay.
Yes.
The other thing that I would use this picture to point out, realistically, if you're looking at young pigs, I want you to take a look at their rear hock joints there on those two pigs. You can see that the Hamp has what we call clean, flexible, flat joints. And if you look down there, particularly behind the spotted pig, you can see that that pig's rear hocks have some abrasions and some bumps and some problems with them. And these are things that are caused from structural defects that don't allow the pig to get up and down correctly, okay? So those are other little things to look for when you're purchasing your young pigs. If they have bumps or swelling in their hock joints or knee joints, there's probably some issue that's going on, and you need to visit with the producer, as well as maybe avoid those pigs if you can, because those are only going to get exaggerated as they get bigger. So, but as you can tell, there's definite change in muscling there, even though both of them, actually, if you look at them and you were buying them and you're looking down the top of the pen, the spotted pig looks thicker down its top than the other pig. And that's kind of an optical illusion because it's so narrow at its base. When you're selecting these pigs, they need to be wider at their base than they are up high. And if you can kind of see that black pig, you kind of want to be able to see their front legs between their back legs if they're walking away from you, because that's a more marked animal shape. So everybody knows what that skeleton is. That's actually the skeleton of a pig, okay? And that's what actually the bones look like in a animal. Now that one's not real levelly designed because it's been put together and pieced back together after we've utilized it. But you can see where the major flexible joints are in those hogs. The rear hock, you can get the point of the shoulder blade out there. And I can't read that because my deal's in the road. The pastern, there where it sits down to the ground. All of those places need to be able to flex and bend when you're talking about them on the live animal. So if you look at those animals, if the skeleton gets too straight, it's going to help, and those angles get too straight on your animal, it's going to be hard to move about. Trying to get, there we go. So evaluating structure and soundness. There's that hamp pig that we saw earlier. He's got clean, flexible joints that have correct angles and have some cushion. He's got some circumference of bone, some bone mass, and a large foot. He's got some levelness to his spine and top, okay? All of those things are an indication of quality structure in an animal. And then you want to be able to see all those animals move. I really don't like buying a pig unless I can see it move, because I think you can tell more truly about how muscular a pig is by the amount of base width it has when you're buying a pig that's between 40 and 80 pounds, which is when most of you guys are going to be purchasing pigs. So evaluating structural correctness. Now I got to get you guys' smiling faces moved over here for me. So sound structurally correct livestock will have clean, flat, and flexible joints, as we said. They'll be able to take long, powerful strides. They won't look like they're walking on pins and needles. They'll have strong pasterns. They'll have good sets to their hocks and knees. They'll have big feet that set flat on the ground. They won't be on little bitty toes. And I think it's very important to read these pigs from the ground up. And they'll have a long, straight top line with a proper head carriage, or their head will be up when they're walking and not have their head down, okay? You can see that blue butt gilt that we talked about earlier. She has some problems off of her back legs. They don't bend and move correctly. As you can see her trying to pick one up and set it down there. She's a little short-strided, and it's not going to be able to get out and move for you. So here's some extreme examples of structure. The hamp pig in the top, or the belted pig, gets a little too straight and really steep in his hip. Can you guys all see that? You can just shake your head if you can see his steep hip where he's high at the top of his hip and gets low at his tail, and then his back legs get really straight. Same with this pig here. If you can look through the front knee on the white pig, you can really see where that pig gets a little too straight. And we're talking about a fine bone pig whose rear pasterns, if you can see those, are almost straight up and down, has no flex and cushion off the rear pastern. Those pigs, as little pigs, were not as bad, but as they gain weight, they're going to get worse. And then there's a really bad structured one. You can almost see how straight shouldered that pig is, how straight his front pasterns are. It looks like his toes drive straight into the ground off of his front end. He's really steep hipped, and he gets a lot of really high in his top, okay? A pig's got to get cushion from someplace, and in this case, if their legs are too straight, then their top gets really high in order to provide some cushion and comfort for them. That's an extremely poor structured pig. So we're going to look at evaluating capacity and volume. And remember that your rib cage will grow as that pig matures from the time you buy it. But there's some important things that I think you need to look at. Pig has to have adequate depth of body, okay? They need to be deep in their rib cage. They need to have some shape to their rib. The rib, you don't want it to be flat. You want the ribs to have some curve to it. If they're flat and they taper from the top to the bottom of their rib, that's not a desirable trait. And I'm losing my mouse here. I can't read that because I got a head. Oh, they need to have some length of body to have capacity. Okay, so they need to have depth, some shape, and some length. The third part of capacity is width. They need some width between their ribs, and really pigs need some width through their chest floor and width as they track behind. So those are important things to think about when you're looking at pigs, when you're buying them as young pigs.
Travis, we can see your mouse when you get your mouse on the pictures.
Oh,
so
you
that was the
can.
first time we could see it. So you can point stuff out that way.
Oh, great. That'll help.
Yep.
I didn't think you could see it. So we've got two examples of just volume and capacity here. And these are in mature pigs. But as you can look at this pig here from the top to the, oh, that's why I don't use my mouse. Let me go previous here. If you look at this pig from the top to the bottom, he has some depth of body. And as that pig matures, they'll get deeper through their flank because there'll be some added depth there. And then we have some rib shape to it. The red pig over here on the other side is very shallow bodied for as tall as it is. A pig that has that kind of shallowness of body is usually pretty hard to feed and doesn't gain for you as well either. So there's a couple examples of volume and capacity. So then we come to evaluating fat thickness. And again, we talked about pigs and where we're going to look at them. We're going to look across their back and loin to see that's where we're going to measure the fat thickness as we come down through the rib on that animal. We're going to look at the top shape, like I said. That pig, and if I can go, has some shape, it has some flare at his ham, has some indentation behind his shoulder blades, and then has some flare out here. So a fairly lean example. And then as a pig matures, we're going to get some fat through the flank and through this elbow pocket up here, where this pig will start to fill in with fat, and then up through the jowl area as they get really fat, they'll put on here. So as your pigs mature, they'll be that. If you have a 100-pound pig that's starting to be filled in those spots, his growth curve's short and he's not going to get very big for you. And then finally, animals fatten from front to back, and then we have this ham seam back here. This will be filled in where this curve is in this ham and get flat across the bottom as that pig starts to get extremely fat and probably too fat as you go towards fair. So fat evaluation. There's candidate 1, there's candidate 2, and there's candidate 3. So in your chat box, is the white pig, the red pig, or the black pig the fattest? Geez, I don't know, everybody. Yep. The white pig is the fattest, as you can tell. That pig has no indentation behind its shoulder here. Oop. Get my mouse back. No indentation behind its shoulder. He's filled out through his jowl. Is deep in his flank, filled in here behind his elbow pocket. You can still see some definition through the elbow pocket of this pig. He's starting to deepen in his flank, but there's still some shape here across the loin. It's not that smooth shape you see. And this pig's probably too lean by today's standards. That pig doesn't have enough fat on it to be what we would call ready for processing at this point in time. So let's talk about a few things as we go forward here. I want to try to move this a little bit. Maybe not. There we go. That's a little better for me. The show pig, we're going to talk about some other things that they make, but I want you to take a look at the pigs because we've been talking pig selection here. There's a white pig, a solid black pig, and a belted pig over here. If you look at those pigs, just looking at them from this picture, you can tell the length of body, length of cannon, length of hip, that this blue-rumped gilt here is going to be shown at a heavier weight than probably that shorter bodied, shorter hipped black pig on the other side. Probably I would target a black pig like this to weigh 250 pounds. This gilt here probably could weigh 280 or 90 pounds, and the belted pig somewhere in between those two. And you can tell that mainly by the length of neck and extension that they have, the cannon bone length, and just total body frame. So we're going to target those pigs for maybe different weight. But while we're on here, we're going to talk about a few things that some kids make mistakes on. I think pen size is very important for your pigs. When you're purchasing these pigs and bring them home, you want to make sure that if they're inside and on a concrete floor, we need some place that's 6 by 10 for those young pigs to get out and move. And if they're outside, it's going to be more of a 16 by 20 per pig that you have. You want to make sure that you have adjustable waters because pigs grow. So you want to be able to raise that water for them as they get older. An adjustable feeder so that you can set it lower when these pigs are young and open it up as the pigs get bigger. You want to make sure it's clean, dry, and that they have some clean bedding and shavings when you bring them home. We're going to try to avoid some rookie problems. Beware of the weather and temperature changes when you bring those home. Pigs that have been in a warm house or a nursery and you bring them home and kick them outside, they tend to sunburn. And more importantly, drastically cold pigs won't grow very well for you. So if they're spending their night shivering in a cold hut, they're not going to perform well for you. As well as in the summer, you've got to keep them cool so they don't get too hot. Also, when you're buying these pigs, you need to talk about parasites and flies. Make sure that they've possibly been wormed or when you need to worm them, and make sure, again, that their waters are work correctly and their feed areas are clean. I try to avoid rough surfaces, in particular rough concrete with these pigs, because you'll buy a pig that's been on a bedded concrete, bring him home, put him on rough concrete, and he'll be limping in a day or two because the bottom of his feet are sore, and you think you bought a problem. And realistically, it's something that can be managed with a little wood shavings or bedding, and make sure their pens are safe. But getting back to selecting pigs over there on that side, if you look at the two pigs there, which one's heavier muscle? The blue-colored pig on the right or the black-colored pig on the left? Got to get the chat box. I keep opening it. Correct. Most of you are saying the blue pig. If you guys can see that that pig almost has a groove from behind his shoulder all the way down his top, his tail sets up there right. The black pig doesn't have quite the shape and expression of muscle in him, but at this age, it wouldn't worry me as much because the black pig's going to probably need to be shown, and he's maybe not quite as far along in his growth curve at the stage that these two pigs are in. So you guys are getting the idea here pretty quick about picking quality pigs. So feeding show pigs, and we'll talk more about that in a later deal, but I think you need to remember that water is probably the most important. If we limit water, we're going to limit gain on any animal. You're going to feed a basic feed that's probably a corn soybean based. A lot of breeders are asking you to feed a product that they call oat groats. They're about a 15% protein that works well with your basic feed. There's also different body products and fat products that you can do. But if you look at that Duroc pig, that gilt over there, there's a lot of good pieces and parts. She's not extremely heavy muscled, but she's going to be a relatively fast growing gilt. She's pretty level in her design. She's got a lot of bone and foot to her, and the angles tend to be right. So there's a Duroc pig that if you're going out and looking for one, has a lot of quality in terms of capacity, muscle, the right frame, the right body and bone skeletal structure to make her worthwhile to purchasing. And then we were going to do daily checks. You want to daily check those animals as we go forward. We want to make sure, again, that the water's clean and working, that the self-feeder's clean and working, that your feeders are attached, and that they're actually eating the feed. Just because you put a lot of feed in the feeder doesn't mean you need to check it to make sure they're actually eating. Get your pigs up and move them so they're moving and healthy, and make some notations. Have a barn feed sheet. Make sure you know how much that pig's eating and what days you filled the feeder. So if we look at that little barrow there in that picture, that York barrow's got a lot of flexibility, heavy boned, big bodied. That pig's a little further along, and we're looking at a pig there that's probably weighing closer to the 80-pound or 90-pound range than he is the 60-pound range. So that barrow there has got a lot of growth and potential in it. At the same time, I don't see him being a very big pig because his front at maturity, because his front cannon gets a little bit shorter. He's carrying quite a bit of muscle at a stage of an 80 to 90-pound pig. There's quite a bit of muscle back there. He's a little earlier in his growth curve because I don't see his neck being as long and as clean as some of the other pigs we looked at in those pictures. So there's a York barrow I'm probably going to target for that 250-pound range again and try to get him there efficiently as I can. So at this time, I'm going to open it up to you guys. If there's any questions or you have comments about pigs that you guys have purchased, I'm going to open it up for that, Kenzie. I don't know how long that took, but we're right at 40 minutes.
You were right on cue. I'm so excited. So we've got good time for questions.
Okay, so I'm going to, I don't know how to unshare this.
On your little dashboard at the bottom or wherever that's floating, the arrow next to your share, there should be like a stop share.
All I have is a new share.
Let's see.
Let me look over here under options.
You do
All
have,
right, so.
You've got a couple questions coming in. Would you like me to read them to you, or you've got it pulled up?
I've got my chat pulled up.
All right.
So Deegan says, if you don't have a self-feeder, is it okay to feed them twice a day, or should you feed them more often? Deegan, what I'd tell you is it's perfectly fine to feed them twice a day. And I think it helps to feed them at least twice a day. Now, if you have a pig that's not gaining faster, the more times you feed it, the easier it is to get that through. So, you know, when the summer comes and you're getting closer to fair and you're a little worried about weight, you might feed them 3 times a day. I'm guessing most of you guys don't have school right now, so if you're going out and checking them 3 times a day because you want something to do to get off these Zoom meetings, feeding them 3 times would be great because they can gain a little faster because you're not putting as much feed through them at one time. I hope that answers your question, Deegan. One of your pigs doesn't have a curved tail. Is that okay? Yeah. Usually when I see a pig that doesn't have a curved tail, is it one is that Tyler or who's typing that one? Is that Tyler? Okay.
You guys can unmute.
If one of your pigs doesn't have,
you.
Yeah, you can unmute too if you want. Is that you, Tyler, that's typing that in? Okay. So Tyler, I'm going to ask you a question here and you can answer it since you're unmute. If your pig doesn't have a curled tail, has it got a short tail?
My pig does have a curled tail. Both my pigs
Your pig does have a, okay. Both yours do. So that must
I wasn't
be,
asking that.
okay. I don't know who was asking that because it's a good question because a lot of pigs' tails have been docked so they're a little shorter so they don't chew on their tails when they're in the nursery. So if your pig doesn't have a curved tail, that's probably all right. Also, if your pig's tail doesn't come up and curve, that's one of those times where I always tell a kid it's a good sign that you may want to worm that pig. Because usually a pig's tail that's down and a little straight is one of our indicators that we may have a worms or a parasite problem with those. So if it's got a long straight tail that kind of lays down, you might just want to worm your pigs just as a precaution, okay? So the shape of the tail is not a huge issue. So as long as you're looking at that, I'm guessing that will change. Should I feed them if they didn't clean up their feed in the morning? Oh, that's a fantastic question. And we'll talk about that when we get to a couple other of these. One of the things that I suggest, and my daughter did very well, is if they don't clean up their feed, Deegan, I take that feed out after about a little while. You know, most of the time they'll clean up 4 pounds of feed in less than 20 minutes. So if you're doing chores and you're feeding them right off and you're cleaning a pen or doing something and they don't clean up their feed, take that feed out and then mix that feed with a little bit of fresh feed and feed them again back that same feed so we don't waste it. If it's just sitting there, there would be lots of things that can get into it when we talk about flies or heat will affect the taste of that. So take that feed out, mix it with some fresh feed, and you can feed it back to them. When do you add extra stuff to feed? We're getting into some of the nutrition questions that we'll get into later. I think when you're talking about extra stuff, my first thing that I'm going to tell you is there is no magic powder that will make your pig a grand champion. I think it has to do more with getting them to the right weight and maintaining the amount of fat they have. Most of the time we feed them things to either express muscle or add fat. So most of the time when you're adding feed additives, you're either using a fat product or a body product or something that has higher energy or more protein in it. So they give them all kinds of names there. And there are some vitamin additives that will help with muscle development. But again, you have to weigh those. So when do we feed them extra stuff? My daughter would usually get those pigs up to a desirable 200 pounds. And then she would start adding different products to her feed at that point in time. So I hope that answers your question there. Some breeders will encourage you to feed it at different times. Like I said, a lot of times check those feed additives and see how long they can be fed, or if there is a withdrawal date on any of those. That's important to remember your MQA that you're taking so that you know those withdrawal dates. So I've got one here. My daughter's pigs eat for 30 to 50 minutes straight. Is that too long? We put 2 scoops of feed in each bucket and let them eat until full. Are we giving them too much? Here's my biggest thing. Everybody, I would encourage you to invest in a feed scale because I don't know how big your scoops are. That's a good question. If you've got 2 scoops of feed in each bucket, and if it's the average 4-pound scoop that you buy at the feed store with the little handle on it, 8 pounds is a lot to be eating for a pig, okay? Depending on how big they are. You know, it's going to take a pig that's going to be 125 pounds before they'll consume 8 pounds. So it also depends on whether you're feeding them what we call a wet feed or just a dry feed. Because if you have a wet feed, they can consume a little bit more of that because the water's already added to the feed. And you're not trying to pack their digestive system with a dry feed. Okay?
So Travis, real quick, because we're getting a lot of these feed questions.
Yep.
If at any point you want to kind of table those and for the nutrition week, feel free to. If you're up for continuing to answer them, feel free to do that as well.
Okay. Well, and Kenzie, we might, if that's where a lot of people have questions right now, we might flip-flop nutrition week for showing and fitting week and do that next week if that works for you as well.
Yeah, the flyer and everything won't necessarily look the same, but I think most people are trying to get on all of them, so I don't mind.
Okay.
It's completely up to you. Everybody, like you said, everybody seems to be leading that way.
Okay.
So I think that's
Well,
absolutely.
I think here's an important one. It says, how much do you increase feed consumption and how often? What I would tell you is 0.2 of a pound tomorrow can make a difference of 10 pounds by fair. So if you can get 0.2 of an extra pound of gain tomorrow and the next day, that could mean 10 pounds on the other end on what your pig actually weighs and gains. So I think these young pigs, we want to make sure that they're cleaning that feed up, that you're feeding them twice a day. And if they're cleaning it up in 30 minutes or so, that's probably a good deal. And here's a number I'm going to give you guys. A pig's probably going to eat 5% of its weight. So a 100-pound pig's probably going to be eating 5, maybe 6 pounds, depending on the feed. Okay? That's why it's hard for a 100-pound pig to gain 2 pounds a day, because we physically can't get enough energy and protein through it. So I think at this stage of the game on these younger pigs, unless you have one that's already weighing 150 pounds, you need to have an idea of what that pig's weighing, and you need to know how much your feed weighs. And we'll talk about that next week if we swap this feed weighing or feeding system thing. Pigs for fair in August. How long and how much exercise should they be getting a day? I think right now people are going to be walking pigs when it's warm. Most of you don't want to have to get out and walk them in the cold. So what I tell you is it's not so much how much exercise they should be getting, because exercise does two things. We get them ready for show, and it also manages the fat level that they have on those pigs. So that being said, what I tell kids to do is work them up to it. Right now, you can walk them out, and if they get tired and want to come back to their pen, kind of take them back to their pen. It's not a matter of how much they need, but by the time we get to fair, the average class at a lot of county fairs, they need to be able to be shown for 30 minutes. So if you got to show them for 30 minutes, they need to be able to walk for 45 so that they don't get tired 20 minutes into your showmanship class or 20 minutes into your market class. Your pigs are very energetic, Tyler. I love it. That's awesome. Energetic pigs are good. One of my favorite things my daughter did is I had an old bowling ball, and she would put it in the pig pen in the barn, and they would push the bowling ball around and give them something to play with. And a bowling ball is pretty indestructible. I wouldn't put just anything in there that they can chew up, but having something in there that they can play with and move around sometimes helps a little bit and keeps them up. And it also is a great trick to get them up and go back to the feeder and eat.
My husband did the same thing. The bowling ball is actually still like in a ditch in their ranch, and it's been like 18 years since he showed pigs, but they've got this random bowling ball hanging around.
Yep. And here's a good one. They hang milk jugs from the ceiling. And that's great because you can adjust the height, but those pigs will get up and play with those milk jugs. It's a great thing to do. Give them something to do. How about that, Mr. J. Stone? How are you? That sounds good. In the past, I have had my pigs in the barn that had a warm water spigot. This year, I can no longer use that barn. Is washing them with cold water okay? I would say yes, okay? Washing them with cold water is going to be okay, but I would say we need the temperature during the day to get above 55 or 60 degrees before you want to wash them with cold water. So if the temperature is not going to get above 55 or 60 degrees, I wouldn't wash them that day, particularly if you're washing them now.
All right, you guys, we are about at the end of our session.